This is a Film Stories original podcast.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale and today I'm delighted to be joined by Julie Seabaugh. She is a writer and documentarian and we're going to be talking about her coverage of the West Coast comedy scene, which has had a huge sort of explosion and impact on the comedy world in America and therefore the comedy world in the world. Julie, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to diving into this.
So the reason that I asked you to come on the podcast, well, first of all, this is Writers on Film, and you're a writer, and your book from I think it's 2018 it was published, is a Ringside, the Roasts. So this is a sort of history or a document about the roast scene, which is kind of feels to me something peculiarly American. Am I right about that?
Ooh, it's definitely kind of an originally American format, I would definitely say. So Ringside at Roast Battle, 5 years of LA's Fight Club for Comedians is something that came out in 2018. Definitely the culmination of a lot of comedy coverage, not only in LA, but definitely across the country. I've lived in New York for several different incarnations over my life. I've covered comedy, specifically comedy, nothing but comedy, for, outlets including Rolling Stone, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Village Voice, New York Times, most recently LA Times. I've been doing this for 22 years because I just love the art form. I think it's more important than, any other art form out there in terms of immediacy and, the philosophical implications it can have on us. I was always a fan of, the Comedy Central roasts, which were kind of begat by the Friars Club roasts originally. And in 2013, Brian Moses was hosting an open mic at the Comedy Store, and some comedians got into a fight in the parking lot. He said, "Don't fight here. Let's take it on stage. Use your words. Be comedians. Be clever." And that's how Roast Battle was born, in the belly room of the Comedy Store, late night Tuesdays in this, kind of 100-seater little upstairs, sweaty closet of a room. And people just packed it immediately. It was this really innovative, fresh way of modernizing the traditional roast in a lot of ways. And now it's been more than 10 years. It's still very much going. It now has a global league all across the world. They've recently added even more cities. They have, big tournaments in Japan every year, but it's also, Barcelona, all across North America, Mexico, and it just keeps growing. I'm actually going to go again tonight to the Comedy Store. So I sling the book whenever I go, kind of keep people in the know of how it really started. It's very much always been kind of an organic group effort that they've tried to emphasize, and just really kind of getting to the heart of, we only roast the ones we love. You have to have an appreciation for your, quote unquote opponent. A lot of times people will get together, and kind of, share their life stories as they're writing and preparing for these battles against each other. And one of the main rules ultimately at the end is we hug at the end of every battle.
There's 3 rules, right?
Right. Original material only. You can't use any, street jokes or yo mama jokes. I sound ridiculous saying yo mama jokes. No physical contact. This is not something that escalates to violence. Except at the end, rule number 3, we hug. It's supposed to be a loving environment. And the thing that I love the most about watching Roast Battle that I never get tired of, I just can't get enough. Watching it kind of helps. I mean, this might just be me personally, but you can embrace your flaws and your shortcomings and, you know, all the things you've done that you regret. We can laugh about these things. We all have them. You know, let's just kind of work through them in this public environment that's so much fun. And everyone's just so into it. I just can't get enough. I'm a massive Roast Battle fan. I think you can tell.
Yeah. I remember. I think was it Nietzsche who said a joke is an epitaph to a feeling, and that idea that, you know, once you've got over it, I always think of it. You know, when you can talk about something in the kitchen, you're okay. You know, you're doing fine, and it sounds like a version of that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the thing that I love about comedy in general, you know, it's a way to transform. Let me take that one again. The thing that I love most about comedy is just the ability to turn anything negative, you know, outright tragedy, anything we face in our lives, to something that we can laugh at and overcome. You know, it takes away the terror of living in this ridiculous world that we've all been thrown into. I just think stand-up comedy is so vital for not only individuals, but, you know, also society. I really love sitting in the back of a room and kind of watching the audience, what they react to and why, because it's this group of completely different people, who knows what their backgrounds are, yet we all came together in this one room, in this one moment, laughing at the same thing. And I know people are going to leave and talk about it and think about it. And that gives me, you know, the most optimism I can kind of currently get out of the current world. We can agree to laugh at certain things together. That's where my slight remainder of optimism remains for humanity these days in particular.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to get onto that, but first of all, I wanted to talk about the sort of this almost taboo nature of a taboo breaking nature of roast, where nothing is sacred. I mean, in the book, you outline people joking about suicide attempts, death, you know, people dying, close, you know, parents or siblings dying. This is of the other person. This isn't, you know, disabilities. And there's a particular exchange that I thought was really interesting. I think it's Leslie Jones walks out of a situation because the roast is kind of racist, and that's also something that it feels like is up for grabs.
So the Los Angeles original version of Roast Battle has definitely kind of skirted around those lines of good taste, for sure. That's the way I'm going to phrase it. There has certainly been a lot said about, you know, what can be too far. And Roast Battle has also had, you know, a house hater who sits in the corner and just says the worst stuff about everyone. And it's part of the show, you know? But everyone going into this knows exactly what they're getting into. This is a joke writing competition. And like you said, nothing is off the table. You know, in the classic Comedy Central roast, the roasty, you know, the headline, the Joan Rivers or the Bob Saget or the, you know, the Donald Trump when he was roasted on Comedy Central. They did have the ability to say these topics are off limits, but that's television. You know, that's business. That's, you know, you're putting that out on the air. There are some guidelines. This is a room where it gets very dark, but, you know, comedy is extremely subjective, never more so than now. And there's also a massive divide that's happening since the pandemic and since social media and technology have kind of more individualized fan bases. But I'm not going to tell anybody what they can or cannot laugh at. I like some really, really dark stuff. I will talk about suicide jokes all day long because it's what you personally relate to, what you've been through. No one knows your life. Comedians are just trying to inject a little levity. Can't make all the people happy all the time. And last night, all those people were at my show. That's a Mitch Hedberg joke that I just quoted. So if there's something that you think is too far, yeah.
Sorry, I just got it.
People all the time. Yeah. You can't please all the people all the time. And last night, all those people were at my show. That's the Mitch Hedberg one. I'm never going to tell anyone what they can and cannot laugh at because, some of the stuff I laugh at, I necessarily wouldn't share with others. But it's, again, how we process the things we've been through, how we make things less scary. I can't state enough how important I think live stand-up comedy is, and just being in that moment that's never going to be recreated again. And just kind of letting everything go and laughing as a group and, selling a couple drinks in the process. Live comedy, I think, is so much more important than anything online, and I will help promote it to the day I die.
I mean, this is what I kind of don't understand sometimes, is when people have talked in the past about the oppressive nature of political correctness and things like that. I never really felt that existed, because in the clubs, it never really existed. I mean, maybe on TV and maybe on there was a thing, but that's always been the case. And I remember going to clubs way back when. Yeah, I went to some clubs in New York, and it was just full of racial material. I went to clubs in, Liverpool and in London, and you got some really daring. I remember there was a guy. I'm going to forget his name now. Jerry Sadovitz, and he would come out. He's a British comedian. He'd come out. He's from Scotland, actually. He'd be very, very angry all the time, and this was the 80s, and he would say, that Nelson Mandela's a fucker, and everyone would be like, "Oh, you can't say that." He goes, "I lent him a $5 years ago. I haven't seen him since," and it would be, it'd be that, and I don't know. It was nowadays you sort of talk about punching down or punching up, and it feels like sometimes punching down's funny. I mean, isn't something being funny kind of its own rule?
Oh yeah, I think the way you phrase that at the end is definitely spot on. I think when, you see someone, take something out of context that happened live, if you're just going to quote, just here's the joke they said, it's not funny. But what was happening in the room at that moment? What was the tone? Is it ironic? Do you understand what irony is? A point can be made by saying the exact opposite of what your actual perspective is. Audiences that are live in the moment understand this, but when you pull that stuff out, that's where you kind of lose that divide of, what's the actual artistry going on here, the full context. I personally always have tried to find in my coverage the deeper levels of what was going on in this person's life, the context in what this material was created. What's the perspective? What is the point that's being made here? It's not the superficial joke. It's so much more than that. Comedy, I think, is just so deep and on so many levels. And again, since pandemic, I think people are definitely appreciating that a lot more.
Have you ever performed comedy yourself?
I have never been someone who wanted to be on stage. I grew up on a rural farm in Missouri. Didn't even know what comedy was until college, when Dave Attell came and did a show. And I had already been writing about film and music in the School of Journalism at Mizzou. And that was the moment I realized, I'm supposed to write about comedy now. And I just moved to New York immediately, followed that path. It's been 22 years now doing that. The only time I've ever performed comedy was at my 40th birthday roast, which was at the Comedy Store. And, you have to have your set at the end where you reply to everyone else. Jeff Ross was there. Dave Attell was there. People like Mike Lawrence, again, Brian Moses from Roast Battle, Brad Williams. It was a fantastic night. And then I had to go up at the end and do my own. Jeff Ross presents Roast Battle. Jeff Ross presents the historic roast. Well, when's Jeff Ross going to present his own goddamn material again? That was one of the jokes. I remember another, this one's going to land so poorly, but like, when I have sex dreams about Dave Attell, I wake up covered in hummus. It makes me, it's like, those are two that I remember. I'm sure the rest was clearly comedy gold, but that was the one time, because you kind of have to. Yes. And again, that was my 40th birthday roast. It's clearly all downhill from there. Nothing is ever going to be that amazing ever again.
And so what you were saying earlier about the subtext and how important it is these days. The elevation of comedians to the point now that we watch the news via them. We don't even watch CNN anymore. We go on Jimmy Kimmel, or people of the right listen to Joe Rogan. People of the left watch Seth Meyers. I was blanking on his name because I was thinking Seth Rogen. Wait a minute, he hasn't got a show about recent events, has he? So this development of sort of the truth teller of comedy. This goes way back to Bill Hicks and George Carlin, right?
Oh, for sure. The social political side of comedy, which is itself definitely divided into different genres, is for sure something that's always historically been important. I did a film project. The documentary was Too Soon, Comedy After 9/11, with my partner, Nick Scown, director. And we kind of traced how, after 9/11, that was actual censorship of comedy in a lot of ways. And we really dove into The Daily Show at that time. And that was the first time when like cable news was kind of getting a bit more, that's when the term fake news was starting to be thrown around. And The Daily Show was kind of poking fun of that. And now, a couple of years down the road, you're correct. It's very much more, the podcasts are much more individualized. You can kind of cull your own fan base. You don't have to appeal to everybody. And I do want to do, I think the next documentary is the Mitch Hedberg documentary coming out next year with director Jeff Siegel. And then after that, I would really love to explore a documentary project about this divide we're seeing. It's something that, comedy is supposed to kind of make us laugh and think and maybe evolve. But how did we get to the point where you kind of have to choose sides? I deal with that a lot personally. I get why would I watch this person from both sides, multiple sides? And now also the point of how did comedy influence an election? Fascinating. But again, I think it's more learning about the psychology of the fans in a lot of ways. Comedians are just trying to be entertainers. They're trying to make people laugh. They're trying to do it on their own terms. No one wants a real job. This is like artistry at its finest. There's nothing between you and the audience. But like, where has this audience come from? Again, especially since the pandemic, and kind of where is it going from here? I'm fascinated with kind of diving into this process a bit more.
I do sort of wonder if someone like Joe Rogan sort of wakes up in the middle of the night and thinks, hang on a minute, maybe I've got way too much influence as essentially a comedian. Maybe I shouldn't be quite so decisive that, Kamala Harris's people are saying that because she didn't go on Joe Rogan, she lost the election.
I still can't help but think of Joe Rogan as this goofy Boston comic. I remember his first album was like how aliens are probing his anus. And that's all I can think of. I still have a hard time saying, that guy is the one. I definitely appreciate that he's built his own thing. I've been to his club multiple times in Austin, and it's gorgeous. And I get what he's done. Do I agree with all of it? No. But the fact that he can make a career, of his own terms and drawing people into comedy, you know what? That's still good for comedy as a whole. I might not agree with it. There's some people there I will not cover, I will not talk to for sure, but let me kind of pick and choose what I want to see. For sure.
I think recently Bill Burr has had an interesting sort of effect in sort of calling comics out and saying, again, on both the left and the right, saying to Bill Maher, "Oh, you're gonna solve the Middle East problem, Bill, because you've read a few articles." And similarly with Joe Rogan, we're not going to get into epidemiology, Joe. We're two guys from Boston. How's that going to work? So I think that's almost been it feels like that's been a necessary corrective.
Especially with Bill Maher, like you said, that's particularly fascinating because in Too Soon, Comedy After 9/11, we really went through how he was legitimately canceled after 9/11.
Yeah, taken off the air.
On his show, Politically Incorrect, which is the title of the show, that anyone who crashes a plane into a building, say what you want, but you can't call it cowardly. That's certainly controversial, but is that worth your show being canceled for? This is, again, right after 9/11, a different time. I've been to Bill Maher's show in the past for different guests and things like that. I also know, a lot of comedians who are now kind of deliberately doing more political material because it's good for business. It is. But that's part of, entertainment and comedy is a business at the end of the day. If you're just talking into the void, then, what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely. You're sort of you've got to talk to your audience, you've got to talk to your public and kind of define them. So you've got this documentary that's showing at Tribeca. Is that a correct pronunciation? I've always read it. I've never actually said it. Tribeca? The Tribeca Film Festival. Can you tell us something about it?
Oh, yes. So Too Soon, cut, restart. So Are We Good is a documentary about Marc Maron, the comedian and podcaster.
So timely.
When the news hit yesterday that his show will be ending, that messed my day up.
Did your phone blow up?
Got a lot of texts. There was a lot of text. I still have to reply to a lot of them when we're done with this interview. That is something that I've been a long-term Marc Maron fan. I have always been fascinated by his ability to really just lay it all out there, pull no punches about even his career, himself, his own shortcomings in his relationships. And he also largely just writes on stage in the moment. He'll go up there with a couple of notes of topics, but he kind of works them out, having that interaction with the audience. I had written about him for like 5 different pieces over the years, I think. He was in Too Soon. He's going to be in the Mitch Hedberg documentary. And, I always see him at the Comedy Store all the time. When the pandemic hit, he was doing these Instagram lives, kind of following the process of him and his girlfriend, the filmmaker Lynn Shelton, hunkering down, preparing for what was going to lie ahead. And 2 months into it, she unexpectedly, very suddenly passes away. He doesn't even know what happens at the moment. Later it was found out that it was an undiagnosed leukemia. And this was a relationship that, as a big fan of his, I knew had changed him in a lot of ways for the better. He had very visibly found a level of happiness that had escaped him in previous years. This is it. This is my life. I can be happy now. And then it's suddenly gone. So his Instagram lives, were just heartbreaking, but beautiful. And he's communicating with the audience, the online audience, which is the only audience you can have at that time. And I realized the next material he was going to do was going to be the best of his career, even though he kept threatening to quit comedy. So when, the restrictions were finally lifted, myself and director Stephen Fine Arts basically kind of showed up at the Comedy Store after a few initial discussions with him where he was completely non-committal, and just started filming the process as he's going through this grief on stage and off. Very intimate, fly on the wall, verite. And yeah, the Tribeca screening will now be the culmination of 4 years of work following that. It deals a lot with grief and evolution and the changing comedy scene. That's a large part of it. And he's sort of answering the question, is he going to kind of continue carrying her with him? Or is he going to revert to this person we've always known him to, the angry, frustrated guy? And it's a lot of deep themes for sure. But that was the whole entire point. I'm particularly excited to be screening this at Tribeca because when I very first moved to New York out of Mizzou School of Journalism, I went on Craigslist trying to look for jobs, as you do as a young 20-something. And Tribeca Film Festival is sponsored by American Express, and American Express had information booths all around the Tribeca Film Festival, and they drug people into them by offering free popcorn. I knew how to make popcorn from working in a movie theater all through college. So I made popcorn at the Tribeca Film Festival for 4 years in the aughts, the early aughts. And so now coming back with, this triumphant return, that's a gross overrealization, but
we'll allow it.
Triumphant, quote unquote. So I'm very, very excited and honored and thrilled, that will be at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I will certainly grab some popcorn at some point too. That was a very long answer. That's
fine. That's fine. Very. I guess the sort of $1 million question is: did you know this was coming? This news was coming, or did you? Or do now that you heard it, do you sort of think, that makes sense?
Yeah, with the podcast ending now. Yeah. This is Marc Maron. Everything he's going to do is on his own terms. That's part of why we love him. He's a very kind of id-driven artist. And it does make a lot of sense because this is a big time of change for him. The end of the documentary kind of sets that up too. So I guess the idea is to kind of mark this era of change in this way. So yeah, the ending is kind of going to be tentatively around the official wide release of the documentary, and more power to him. He does it the way he wants to do it, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
He's a comedian. To match it with the earlier part of our conversation, he's a comedian who's very self-reflexive, obviously towards himself, but also to the comedy scene generally. The WTF podcast initially started off with really investigating and having conversations with other comedians, Carrot Top and I was a famous example of one that I didn't think necessarily went particularly well, but there were times that he would have really he'd almost be like settling beefs or you remember when we did that in the club? Or Louis C.K. he had a brilliant episode with which I kind of always wished Louis C.K. would go back, because I think that would have been a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some kind of repeat guests, kind of revisiting these things as it's winding down. My favorite episode, whenever anyone asks me, is comedian Todd Glass coming out as gay on WTF, which just really illustrates, the immense influence it had at that time, that, not only this was the platform he was going to take, but it was a safe space for him to do it, in an encouraging environment, a safe environment, with a fellow comic who understands, him for years, that kind of thing. And yeah, really that podcast has been so influential to so many people, not emotionally, but it's kind of joked about in the documentary of, he's kind of responsible for this plague that's been unleashed upon the world with podcasts. And it really has transformed the media and, promotional landscape as well. We're doing one right now, and we can trace that to the influence of WTF, for sure.
Oh, no, absolutely, 100%. I mean, just the fact that my format of podcast is an hour-long conversation with no sort of bells or whistles comes entirely from I take the confidence of being able to do that from the fact that I've heard Marc Maron do those hour-long conversations, and just thought, well, yeah, I can do that. I mean, I'm not as talented, etc., but I can do that. I'm a white guy. I have to have a podcast.
You just need about 5 or 6 cats, and then you'll be on the same level as Marc Maron.
I've got 3.
Perfect.
I'm on my way.
You're in the club.
So what's Mark's response to the documentary? Has he seen it yet?
Yes. He was not really necessarily given privy to what was happening during the filming. He was asked questions, would you prefer this or this? But he only saw the cut before we had our initial South by Southwest Film Festival screening, which was in March, about, I think, a week before the final cut was due for that. He had different conversations with different people. For me personally, he sent an email, the word amazing was used, and he said he learned a lot about himself from watching. There's a part where, well, it's not even a part, it's kind of an overarching theme of how he really doesn't feel that he's that successful. He sees other people as having kind of passed him and having a lot more influence, but it's when you look at it from a meta perspective, I wanted to do this documentary on him specifically because that's the opposite of how I saw him, for sure. And there's a lot of things. We deal with his relationship with his father, who in a lot of ways has kind of traditionally been the main villain of his life, but also the reason he got into comedy in the first place. And he now has a new relationship with his father, who has dementia. And that was actually something we kind of bonded on. My father does as well. And just kind of dealing with that process as someone who I haven't necessarily liked this person for a large amount of my life, but now it kind of falls on you to change that. You're the one who has to change that relationship. And everything that brings out of you, he's doing it way better than I am, for sure. But that was kind of one of the relationships. They have a conversation at the end of the film about, Maron thinks he hasn't been successful, and his father's like, you've been tremendously successful. What are you talking about? And these kind of moments where, he'll look away and think and that kind of thing. And I just think it's a really good portrait of a specific time and place in this guy's life, the present moment of the active grieving and dealing with the loss and turning that into brilliant dark material, and kind of going back and forth to, lead up to the person that he was, who he is now, dealing with aging, dealing with the change in comedy. It's pretty open-ended at the end, but I kind of feel like the best documentaries should be. You don't really necessarily want to know the answer in a lot of ways.
And I've got a dry throat now, so
yeah. I'm drinking my green juice.
What is that?
It's Bulletproof Greens. It's vitamins and some things for your brain, and it's supposed to make you happy.
Oh, I see. Because in Europe, we just eat food.
Yeah, I try to do that too. Yeah.
Like vegetables and stuff.
Yeah. I do try to be a pretty healthy person because I know the connection to body and mind. But especially right now, tons of interviews and then Tribeca coming up and a billion things on my plate, just trying to get a little extra advantage.
Yeah, exactly. You need a little bit of
green juice.
Belts and braces.
Yeah.
Talking about what we were talking about earlier to sort of tie this part together as well. The interventions Marc has made sometimes in the world of comedy. I mean, it's so interesting because sometimes on WTF he'll say something in his introduction about, the debate about where people talking about, oh, you can't do comedy anymore and this sort of stuff, and he'll directly respond to that stuff brilliantly and cogently, and he knows his shit. So he's and then I'll open the newspaper, The Guardian or something, and it'll have an entire feature, and the feature will just be more or less a transcript of what Marc Maron said on the latest WTF. And it's just like, wow, that's A, lazy journalism, and B, kind of very impressive sort of reach that that comedians have in our culture.
I could have a whole separate conversation with you about lazy journalism and the current state of journalism in the modern world, but we'll save that for next time. There's actually a scene in the documentary where he is doing one of those WTF pod introductions, and it's that exact topic of, comics are saying I can't talk about stuff anymore, I'm too controversial, no one wants to hear my take, and he's like, maybe you're just not funny. Be funnier. That's the whole point. If you can't even be funny, then anything you have to say is, it's that whole, taking the medicine in with the honey kind of thing. You have to be funny first and foremost.
Yeah, if it's just bile, then there's nothing there. I mean, I often think the funniest is when you shouldn't laugh but can't help laughing, rather than you shouldn't laugh and don't because you can help laughing.
Yeah, that physical reaction is, it's one of the, they tell you how healthy it is to laugh. Laughter is the best medicine. But it's true, when you do have that involuntary, like, oh my God, like, it's good for you in a lot of ways. For me, it's, I tend to be more of a loner in general, have a large history of, dealing with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations, and all those things. But comedy is definitely the space where I know I'm supposed to be. And everyone in it has some sort of issues, for sure. They're all there for a reason. And I like finding out those reasons. And just kind of, again, it goes back to roast battle. Like, let's just celebrate it and be people and be in this space together. Comedy is definitely my social structure as well. That's probably not healthy, but it's true. All my best friends are in comedy for sure. And even if I'm not working on something specifically, it's what I'm going to be watching as well.
Yeah, I remember getting into Derek and Clive when I was a kid, and it just being it's like so appalling and yet at the same time so funny. And Peter Cook was one of those people who again thought about comedy and satire specifically. And I keep thinking of what he said when I look at the situation today, where he talks about how wonderful satire has been in changing the world for the better, just like those cabaret clubs did in the 1930s when they defeated Hitler. And I sort of do, I do have the, I do wonder if sometimes that release valve, which is really important, can also be something which stops us from taking the world seriously enough to do something about it.
Ooh, that's deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So I
Yeah.
lulled you into a sense of false security.
I think a lot of us are these days just trying to hang in there.
Right.
In different scenarios, we might be able to do more. But also I think inversely, it might be a gateway in certain ways. I think comedy can really foster a lot of empathy when you hear from different people and different perspectives, and they make you think about things that you wouldn't have ordinarily thought about. And again, it's now much more, thanks to social media and podcasts and all that, kind of interconnected. Whereas, everything was just live in the 80s and 90s, and none of it, that's all. You just see it live and that's it. So, yeah, it can be a channel to discuss these things. Maybe an awakening to certain issues or people or that kind of thing. Ooh, I'm kind of going to think about that one for a while.
I mean, I can give you an example. If there was all before the first Trump presidency, I was watching Seth Meyers. I was getting my news from Stephen Colbert, all these sort of stuff. And then the second Trump presidency, I literally have only just started watching Seth Meyers because I couldn't bear watching it. It was just like, I can't laugh at this. It's not funny. Just the topic isn't, it's too close. I needed that sort of, I wasn't ready to go into the kitchen and have a laugh about it yet.
Yeah, I actually have had a parallel experience now that you mention it. Yeah, I did look at everything on Twitter, in the first presidency. I've since left Twitter and don't really watch the news. The quote unquote news. Again, this is a separate conversation we could be having about what's true in news these days. But that might also be kind of a form of self-preservation for sure. And I don't think I do have a problem really with processing it through comedy. Or else, I don't, again, this is just me personally, but, from past thoughts and things I try to get through, it's still comedy that gets me, thinking that maybe there is that optimistic side. So maybe we're all kind of lying to ourselves a little bit. I'm not sure what else to do at this point. Yeah.
Whatever gets you through the night.
I think, yeah. Comedy and my green juice.
So, other than Marc Maron, or including Marc Maron, who do you see as sort of like who are the exciting comedians that you're seeing at the moment?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one too. I will always have, a major soft spot for Dave Attell, who originally got me into comedy. And in America is like the best of the best. He's not, a new voice by any means whatsoever. But his most recent special on Netflix, like every comedian posted about it and watched it multiple times. Because he's one of, Dave Attell is one of the people who will go so dark and so dirty, and yet he's the nicest, most kindest guy. Loves comedy as an art form. He's taking care of his mother who has dementia, and he also has a lot of history of depression and uses comedy to survive. It's just a prime example. There's a lot of younger talent around the store and in LA as well. I love Steph Tolov. She's a young woman who, again, pretty dark and dirty, but right on the cutting edge of what it means to be I don't know how to say, a modern woman in comedy. the comedy business has traditionally not been the kindest to women. Probably still not today.
Back to Louis C.K. again.
Yeah. I love Robin Tran. She is a Vietnamese trans comedian who, again, goes there. Really goes there, for sure. Who else is? I even just recently, I loved, again, not new, but Sarah Silverman's most recent special, where she's dealing with grief. Tremendous work from her. It's less kind of cutesy and avoidant and more just really kind of pulling back the veil on what it means to see a parent go slowly. Laurie Kilmartin has done that. She's really there. I like that I'm saying all women. I'm going to continue with that theme. Yeah. Jackie Cation, I love. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of great new talent. It's about that discovery process. And for, the negative sides, the social media, there's also the good sides of that discovery process of comedy. I think it's so phenomenal to see someone who's just more a casual fan of something really love an artist and start following them because they speak to them. But, that's, we've kind of had, this conversation earlier about, but Joe Rogan also does that, but other people do too, in their own way.
And I love the fact that you mentioned all those women as well, because I seem to remember it was like 15 years ago. It was a while ago, but someone came out with a sort of like women just aren't funny thing. And if I remember rightly, it was just as Amy Poehler and Tina Fey broke. And so it was like the guy looked like an absolute arse. Like 1 week later, he was just like faced with probably the funniest women to come out of this new batch of comedians. I mean, we can go way back to, there's a whole history of brilliant female comedians. Joan Rivers, you've already mentioned. Elaine May, as an improvised comedian, was superb. And she directed Ishtar, which I will go to my grave saying is a wonderful movie. Julie, I always ask...
Phyllis Diller.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, the most popular TV comedians were frequently women in terms of...
Oh, yeah. And also Bonnie McFarland, who's originally from Canada, now is a comic out of New York. She made a documentary about women not being funny, which was obviously, she's taking the opposite approach, and they are. So that's, I recommend that one as well. Even like Nikki Glaser is huge right now. She's from Missouri, too.
There you go.
Seeing her, go from... I'm trying to remember. I'll leave that, but just seeing her path to success to being, the go-to person for roasts and so much more. She's a pop culture figure at this point, as well it should be, and definitely more female comedians should be joining those ranks as well, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Julie, as a last question, we always ask on this podcast, I always ask on this podcast, there's nobody else here, for a recommended film book, because this is Writers on Film. We're interested in books, and of course you can recommend something about comedy if you wish, or film or TV or whatever. The category is broad.
I was going to say, no one there but your cats.
Exactly. Me and Heidi and Victor and Atticus.
Yeah. The Robert Rodriguez is classic, obviously. I'm currently going back through, there's a Robert Altman oral history, because I'm doing another separate oral history project that I can't quite talk about yet. But I love getting all those different voices and perspectives and really into the nitty-gritty details of what people remember and what they find funny in the moment, and kind of committing it all to history in this way. That's my current read. But the Rodriguez one has been hugely influential. DIY, just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, this is the guerrilla filmmaking.
Yeah, you learn through doing. And it's very true. I've done this myself with, as someone who's traditionally been a writer and is now starting a fourth documentary. You learn in the process how to do it, and you can't let anybody tell you what path it should be. It has to come from your gut, fully across the board. If you do what you're told to do, I find that you kind of lose parts of yourself in the project. It's not as authentic as it could be, and thus maybe not as good as it can be. Those would definitely be my two go-tos for sure.
And let's face it, if the film tanks at Tribeca, you can immediately go to the lobby and get a job making popcorn.
That's my plan. I'm going to fill out an application on the way in.
Just to cover all your bases.
Yeah. There's a little too much seasoning salt in this one. You need to up the coconut oil recipe, and that'll be more of a crowd pleaser. You don't want to have the heat too high, that kind of thing. Yeah, let's have a podcast about popcorn making.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know what I do? I always buy some M&Ms and put them inside the popcorn and mix them up in the salty and the sweet. Except I had a real problem because I went to see A Quiet Place, and the first jump scare, the M&Ms and the popcorn went all over the place. and then rolled to the front of the cinema, which embarrassed my daughter a little bit.
There's a venue here in LA, Dynasty Typewriter Comedy Theater, gorgeous old theater. Off of Wilshire. They have a popcorn bar as part of their amenities. I tend to get the Reese's Pieces or the Hot Cheetos in the popcorn myself. That's just my taste.
Wow. Oh, you're right. We're going to have a gourmet popcorn podcast. It's coming soon. Be careful, because people have suggested podcasts and they have emerged on this show. So be careful what beast you stir from the deep. Julie Seabaugh, thank you so much, and hopefully we will be seeing your. When does your film go on sort of general release? Have you got a distributor?
Can't quite talk about that yet. Okay. It's all very much in process, and again, the tentative timeline will be along the same lines as the ending of WTF now. But yeah, nothing but good things. I can update you when there's more on that. But I definitely think not even people in comedy, but this is kind of a universal experience of how do we deal with grief and get to the point of being able to laugh. So I think hopefully it'll be a bit more universal than just hardcore Marc Maron and Cat and popcorn fans.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Julie. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
This is tremendous. Thank you so much.